In a Walmart in Ohio, an old man was branded a thief, his coat torn open before a jeering crowd. No one asked why, no one cared who he was, and when his sleeve was ripped, a tattoo emerged on his arm, met only with mockery. Unaware, it hid a shocking truth. This is the story of Harold Grayson, an old man scorned in peacetime, yet carrying a secret that would make the world bow in reverence. Listen, for this tale will ignite your outrage and then transform how you see those around you. On an ordinary afternoon at a Walmart in Ohio, an old man shuffled in with a modest cart, a cheap jug of milk, a loaf of white bread, and a pack of ramen. No one noticed him, no greetings, not a single kind glance. His thinning silver hair, stooped shoulders, faded flannel shirt, baggy slacks, and worn-out sneakers marked him as unremarkable. His steps were slow and quiet, as if each carried the weight of a heavy life. He approached the checkout, where a young cashier, Kayla, scanned items for customers. But before he could place the milk on the conveyor, a shrill shout cut through. "Hey, you stop. Right there." A towering security guard charged forward, his face etched with suspicion, hands on hips, voice thick with command. "Open your bag. I saw you stuff something in your coat." The crowd turned. Shoppers paused their carts, some peeked over shelves. Doubtful glances spread. The old man looked up, his cloudy eyes strangely calm. "I didn't take anything. Just these," he said, his voice low, deliberate, pointing to his cart. The guard didn't wait. He yanked the man's sleeve as if catching a thief red-handed. A chilling rip echoed through the bustling store. The flannel tore, exposing a frail, wrinkled arm and a tattoo. The crowd stilled for a moment, then murmurs rippled. "Look at that. Probably stole something. Old and still thieving. Shameful." The whispers stung like tiny needles, piercing the tense air. Kayla froze, her eyes locked on the strange tattoo, a faded eagle clutching a sword encircled by barbed wire, its ink worn by time. But no one knew. That tattoo was once the covert emblem of an elite unit, and the man they'd humiliated had held the map of life and death for a mission still classified to this day. Yet he said nothing. He stood still, hand gripping the cart. No resistance, no explanation, as if he was used to it. They saw only a poor, ragged old man, but the truth lay silent, just beneath his weathered skin. In a Walmart in Ohio, an old man was branded a thief, his coat torn open before a jeering crowd. No one asked why, no one cared who he was, and when his sleeve was ripped, a tattoo emerged on his arm, met only with mockery. Unaware, it hid a shocking truth. This is the story of Harold Grayson, an old man scorned in peacetime yet carrying a secret that would make the world bow in reverence. Listen, for this tale will ignite your outrage and then transform how you see those around you. On an ordinary afternoon at a Walmart in Ohio, an old man shuffled in with a modest cart, a cheap jug of milk, a loaf of white bread, and a pack of ramen. No one noticed him. No greetings. Not a single kind glance. His thinning silver hair, stooped shoulders, faded flannel shirt, baggy slacks, and worn-out sneakers marked him as unremarkable. His steps were low and quiet, as if each carried the weight of a heavy life. He approached the checkout, where a young cashier, Kayla, scanned items for customers. But before he could place the milk on the conveyor, a shrill shout cut through. "Hey, you stop right there." A towering security guard charged forward, his face etched with suspicion, hands on hips, voice thick with command. "Open your bag. I saw you stuff something in your coat." The crowd turned. Shoppers paused their carts, some peeked over shelves. Doubtful glances spread. The old man looked up, his cloudy eyes strangely calm. "I didn't take anything. "Just these," he said, his voice low, deliberate, pointing to his cart. The guard didn't wait. He yanked the man's sleeve as if catching a thief red-handed. A chilling rip echoed through the bustling store. The flannel tore, exposing a frail, wrinkled arm and a tattoo. The crowd stilled for a moment. Then murmurs rippled. "Look at that. Probably stole something. Old and still thieving. Shameful." The whispers stung like tiny needles, piercing the tense air. Kayla froze. Her eyes locked on the strange tattoo, a faded eagle clutching a sword encircled by barbed wire, its ink worn by time. The store seemed to pause at that moment, all eyes fixed on the old man by his cart. The torn sleeve lay beside the milk jug, the eagle and barbed wire tattoo on his arm exposed like a secret unveiled. The murmurs persisted, a low hum like an undercurrent. But he didn't react. He quietly nudged his cart aside, his clouded eyes dropping to the tiled floor as if wanting to leave without a trace. The guard, still suspicious, faltered. His hand releasing the torn fabric. The air was taut as a bowstring. Kayla, the cashier, stopped scanning, her gaze shifting from the tattoo to the old man's face. Something in his silence unnerved her, as if she'd witnessed something that never should have happened. But no one in the store knew his name. They saw only a poor, ragged old man, a stranger, a suspect. Yet Harold Grayson was no nobody. He lived quietly on the town's edge, in a small house where neighbors knew him as the man who raked leaves, gave kids candy at Halloween, and spoke little of himself. No one knew. He'd walked battlefields whose names alone chilled the spine. Fallujah, Ramadi, Mosul, places where dust and blood were his companions for years. He'd been part of an elite unit deemed never allowed to fail. Now, at 70, he chose to live in the shadows. No medals, no ceremonies, no one knew. And he didn't need them to. In that small house, under his bed, lay an old wooden box. Inside were yellowed photos, a unit ring, and a crumpled letter from a friend who never came home. Each morning, he rose early, brewed strong black coffee, and sat by the window, watching the empty street. Beside him was Sarge, an old dog he'd rescued, named for a fallen comrade. Harold shared half his bread with Sarge, then walked the neighborhood. Sometimes he paused by a fence to chat with the neighbor's boy, who asked about war. Harold just smiled. "You're young. Go play ball," he'd say. Today, he'd only meant to buy enough for the week. In his pocket was a small, worn photo, its edges frayed, showing him beside a high-ranking officer under Iraq's dusty red sky. But no one in the store saw it. They saw only an old man with a strange tattoo, and they laughed. They doubted. "Probably showing off," someone muttered. Kayla heard it, but she couldn't look away. She saw how he bent down, picking up the torn sleeve, placing it in the cart with gentle hands, as if it weren't just cloth but a piece of memory he didn't want to be touched. At that moment, from the aisle's end, a man in a leather jacket paused. Frank, a retired local cop, had seen many tattoos in his time, but that eagle and barbed wire he'd never forget. He'd seen it once, on a soldier's arm in a distant war, in a story he'd never retold. Frank walked toward Harold, slow, silent, as if piecing together a memory dusted by time. Harold didn't notice the stare. He stood by his cart, no apology, no defense, no anger. He only covered the tattoo with his hand, as if it didn't belong there. Then, at that moment, a photo slipped from his pocket. It fell to the floor, landing by Kayla's feet. She bent down and picked it up, and in that instant, she saw two men in desert fatigue, standing side by side, one a younger, rugged Harold, a rare smile under Iraq's scorching sun, She said nothing, but her hand tightened on the photo. Something stirred in her heart. Not fear, but respect. She wanted to call out, to say something. But Harold had turned, pushing his cart toward the exit, quietly, as if he'd never belonged here. The air in the Ohio Walmart turned stifling. Every eye locked onto Harold Grayson, the old man standing silently by his cart, a torn sleeve exposing the eagle and barbed wire tattoo on his frail arm. Murmurs grew louder, laced with snickers and cold taunts. Harold stood still, hands gripping the cart's handle, his clouded eyes fixed on the tiled floor. He said nothing, no resistance. He only pulled his sleeve to cover the tattoo as if shielding a memory no one should touch. But the crowd didn't stop. They didn't see the photo that had slipped from his pocket. Nor did they notice Kayla, the cashier, her unease as she held it, glimpsing Harold's youthful smile from a time she couldn't fathom. The security guard, who'd ripped Harold's shirt, regained his harsh tone. "What are you still doing here? Get out. Don't bother the customers." He stepped forward, nudging the cart aside as if forcing Harold to leave without another word. Some in the crowd laughed louder, a few raising phones to record, their eyes gleaming with amusement. "Look, the old guy got caught," a teenager shouted, live streaming, his voice dripping with scorn. Comments flashed on the screen, sharp as pins. "Veteran looks like a bum," a middle-aged woman muttered as she passed, not sparing him a glance. Her words, though soft, cut like a blade. Kayla froze, her hand trembling, clutching the photo. Harold said nothing. He picked up the torn sleeve from the cart, folding it carefully as if touching something sacred. In his pocket, a silver badge etched with USMC. Fallujah 2004 peeked out, but no one noticed. He pushed the cart toward the exit, his steps slower, shoulders more stooped. Then, a voice rang from the nearby manager's desk, icy, contemptuous. "Who do you think you're causing trouble here?" A man in a white shirt, name tag reading manager, Tom, strode out, face twisted with disdain. "If you were really a soldier, you wouldn't be like this." Stealing his words landed like a final hammer blow. The crowd erupted in laughter. Some clapped. Phone flashes blinked, capturing what seemed a farce. The photo in Kayla's hand fell to the floor, landing at Tom's feet. He glanced down, smirked, and kicked it aside like trash. "Pick up your stuff, don't dirty the place," he said, his voice so cold it cracked the store's air. Kayla moved to retrieve it, but stopped. As Harold's quiet gaze met hers, not angry, not pleading, just weary and serene. He bent down and picked up the photo with both hands, smoothing its edge as if it held a memory no one should see. He tucked it back in his pocket and resumed pushing the cart toward the door. Laughter trailed him. Phones kept filming. But a few in the crowd fell silent. An 8-year-old girl, standing by her mother, tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, why are they laughing at him? He looks so sad." Her mother didn't answer, just pulled her away. But the girl's eyes followed Harold until he faded from view. Nearby, Frank, in his leather jacket, stood motionless, his gaze fixed on Harold's tattoo. A retired cop. He'd seen countless tattoos, but that eagle and barbed wire he'd never forget. Years ago, he'd seen it on a soldier who saved a child amid a war's smoke and fire, in a story he'd never retold. Frank stepped toward Harold, but before he could speak, Tom signaled the guard, "Get him out. Now, don't upset the customers." The guard nodded, grabbing Harold's arm and pulling him without a chance to speak. The cart veered. The milk jug fell. It shattered, white liquid pooling on the tiles. Laughter burst again, louder, crueler. Old guy showing off his tattoo, someone said, and the crowd roared. But no one knew. That tattoo was once the covert emblem of an elite unit, and the man they'd humiliated had held the map of life and death for a mission still classified to this day. Yet he said nothing. He stood still, hand gripping the cart, no resistance, no explanation, as if he was used to it. They saw only a poor, ragged old man, but the truth lay silent, just beneath his weathered skin. Harold remained silent. He retrieved the torn sleeve from the cart, folding it carefully as if it held something sacred. A silver badge etched with USMC. Fallujah 2004 peeked from his pocket, but no one noticed. He pushed the cart toward the exit, steps slow, shoulders more stooped. Then a voice rang out from the manager's desk, icy, venomous. "Who do you think you are, causing a scene?" A man in a white shirt with a name tag reading manager. Tom strode forward, his face twisted with contempt. If you were really a soldier, you wouldn't be this pathetic. Stealing his words struck like a final blow. The crowd roared with laughter, some clapped, phone flashes blinked, capturing the farce. The photo in Kayla's hand fell, landing at Tom's feet. He smirked, kicking it aside like trash. "Pick up your junk. Don't mess up the place," he said, his voice so cold it fractured the air. Kayla moved to grab it but stopped, as Harold's quiet gaze met hers. Not angry, not pleading, just weary and serene. He bent down, retrieving the photo with both hands, smoothing its edge as if it were a memory no one should see. He tucked it back in his pocket and resumed pushing the cart. Laughter trailed him. Phones kept filming, but a few fell silent. An 8-year-old girl by her mother tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, why are they laughing? He looks so sad." Her mother said nothing, pulling her away, but the girl's eyes followed Harold until he vanished. Nearby, Frank, in his leather jacket, stood frozen, his gaze on Harold's tattoo. A retired cop, he'd seen countless tattoos, but that eagle and barbed wire he'd never forget. Years ago, he'd seen it on a soldier who saved a child amid war's smoke and fire, a story he'd kept silent. Frank stepped toward Harold, but before he could speak, Tom signaled the guard, "Get him out, now. Don't upset the customers." The guard nodded, seizing Harold's arm and pulling him. The cart tipped. The milk jug fell, shattering, white liquid pooling on the tiles. Laughter erupted again, crueler, old guy flaunting his tattoo. Someone sneered, and the crowd howled. Harold paused just before the store's exit. Not because he was pulled, but because he wanted to see the photo one more time. He drew it out, hands trembling, tracing the face of a young soldier beside him, a friend, a comrade who never came home. The crowd saw only a humiliated old man, chased from a place where he'd come to buy a week's supplies. They didn't know. The man they mocked was why dozens returned home whole. The glass doors slid open. A cold gust swept in, carrying the acrid scent of exhaust and road dust, as if heralding a shift. Harold stood at the threshold, the photo, now damp from spilled milk, in his hand. The crowd behind kept whispering. Phones stayed raised, snickers lingered. The guard held his shoulder. Tom, the manager, stood arms crossed, eyes devoid of remorse. Kayla clutched the fallen photo, eyes red, throat tight, unable to speak. It seemed the scene would end with an old man cast out in shame, but no one expected that in mere seconds. The room would fall silent. An engine's roar cut through the parking lot. Not a car's hum, deep, heavy, decisive. 3 glossy black SUVs bearing military insignias screeched to a halt outside, tires grinding on hot asphalt, dust swirling in the midday heat. Doors flew open. A group emerged. They said nothing, but their stride firm, unwavering. Each step precise froze the store. Leading them was a man in his 50s, in a U.S. Marine Corps uniform, chest adorned with medals, 4 gleaming stars slicing through the onlooker's gaze. Lieutenant General James Carver. A name no one who followed military news could ignore. Behind him, 6 young soldiers in crisp uniforms followed, their eyes sharp as blades. They spoke no words, but their silence roared louder than any accusation yet. The crowd shrank back. Phones lowered, hands faltering. Even Tom froze, his arms dropping, face paling. No one knew what was happening, but all felt. Something unprecedented was unfolding. Carver entered. His combat boots crunched over the spilled milk, leaving stark prints on the tiles, chillingly deliberate. He didn't glance at the crowd, didn't question the guard, didn't need a report. His eyes locked solely on Harold still, by his cart, photo in hand, gaze empty. Carver stopped 3 steps away. The store held its breath. No one dared move. Then, in the suffocating silence, Lieutenant General Carver raised his hand. A salute, precise, firm, unhurried, reverent. "Colonel Grayson," he said, his voice low but ringing like steel bells. "We've been looking for you a long time." No one laughed, no one filmed. Every sound vanished as if the world had stilled at those 3 words. Harold didn't respond. He met Carver's gaze, blinking once, then stood still. No return salute. But his hand trembled. Perhaps from the wind. Or perhaps because a past he'd buried was now called by name. Carver held the salute a moment longer, then lowered his hand, stepping closer, his voice softer. "Your team still remembers, and we never forgot what you did." The guard released Harold's arm, recoiling as if burned. Tom opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His eyes met Carver's, and he knew. This was no longer about an old man in a small store. This was an honor, duty, something no apology could erase. The air in the Ohio Walmart grew heavy. No more whispers, no more mocking laughter. The fluorescent light still burned, but seemed dimmed under the towering shadow of Harold Grayson. The old man just saluted with military honors by Lieutenant General James Carver. Harold stood by his cart, still holding the old photo, his gaze not shocked, only sad and serene, as if this ordeal was one he'd long grown used to. The crowd bowed their heads. Eyes that once jeered now darted away. Silenced. Kayla, the cashier, clutched her name tag, tears falling quietly. Frank, the retired cop, stood nearby, his gaze deep reverent and perhaps pained. The silver USMC Fallujah 2004 badge peeked from Harold's pocket, glinting faintly. A wordless reminder of truths no one dared speak. Carver stepped closer, his voice low and clear, resonating as if shattering a silence held too long. "This man is not just a veteran, he's the reason I stand here." He looked at Harold, his eyes not merely respectful but etched with bone-deep gratitude. In 2004 at Fallujah, Colonel Harold Grayson led Eagle Task Force, holding a base under relentless fire for 3 days. No reinforcements, no food, only faith and a vow to live or die for his men. He saved an entire company, including my father. Carver paused, his eyes softening, voice faltering. "My father said, if not for Harold Grayson, I wouldn't have been born." Behind him, a young soldier bowed his head, fist clenched, as if holding back a flood in public. Frank took a step forward, his voice hoarse, quiet, trembling. "I heard of Eagle Task Force. As a cop, they came back from hell." He glanced at Harold's arm. where the eagle and barbed wire tattoo lay exposed. That symbol, no one dares wear it, not unless they've stared death in the face and walked away from a place no one should survive. Frank turned to the crowd, his voice hardening. "You got it wrong. He's no thief, he's a legend." For the first time that afternoon, no one dared argue. Harold stayed silent. He looked at the photo in his hand, a faded snapshot from 2004. Him beside a young soldier under Iraq's dusty red sky. That soldier never came home. Harold brushed it gently as if bidding farewell again. Then he looked up, his voice low but clear. "I just did what needed doing. No one should be remembered alone." Those words, brief, unadorned, choked the store's air. Kayla covered her mouth, a tear tracing her cheek. She stepped forward, touching his cart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know who you were." Harold met her gaze. A faint, kind smile curved his lips. "It's okay, young lady," he said, his voice soft as a breeze. "I just wanted milk." That simple phrase, so plain, silenced the room further as if it held all he'd never spoken. A young soldier from Carver's team knelt, holding out a silver badge. "Sir, this is yours." Harold took it, his hand trembling slightly, but his eyes remained steady as if everything was falling back into place. Carver continued, slow, as if recounting history. After Fallujah, Colonel Grayson refused all medals. He asked that hero honors go to his fallen comrades. He buried them himself. He carved their names on the memorial himself. He paused, pulling a sealed envelope, its red wax stamp intact, from 2005. "This is a letter from the President. For you. You never opened it. You said you didn't need recognition." Harold didn't reply, but his hand tightened on the letter, as if something long buried stirred in his heart. The crowd bowed their heads. Tom, the manager, stepped back, his face ashen, lips moving but voiceless. The teenager who'd live-streamed deleted his video, his hand shaking as he stared at the blank screen. Kayla, the cashier, stood gripping her name tag, tears still wet, but her eyes now shone with pride and gratitude. A woman in the crowd began clapping, slow, soft. Then another joined, a third. The Walmart didn't erupt in cheers, but a quiet, steady applause rose, a nameless ritual for a man they'd nearly forgotten. Harold didn't look at them. He nudged his cart aside as if his business here was done, but Carver placed a hand on his shoulder. "Colonel, we came for you today." The 6 young soldiers behind Carver stood at attention, hands to their foreheads, saluting again this time. A younger generation honoring their leader. That image, an old man in a torn coat, framed by crisp uniforms, was one no one in the store that day could ever forget. The Ohio Walmart sank into a sacred silence. No more barcode beeps, no more jeers or whispers, only the pale fluorescent glow and Harold Grayson's quiet presence, a man who'd stepped from the shadows of prejudice to become a living emblem of courage. He stood by his battered cart beside the spilled milk, still holding the faded photo, his gaze calm, distant. Carver's hand rested on his shoulder, anchoring him to the present. The 6 soldiers stood rigid, eyes unwavering. Kayla wiped her tears. Frank bowed his head, and the crowd, one by one, lowered their faces, as if too ashamed to meet their own reflections after all they'd done. Harold said nothing. He eased the cart toward the door, but before leaving, he paused. He drew the photo from his pocket, glancing at it one last time. His trembling fingers brushed the young soldier's face, then tucked it away. He didn't acknowledge the apologies, didn't nod to the crowd. He only met Carver's gaze, giving a slow, faint nod of final salute. Then he stepped out. Afternoon sunlight poured through the glass, bathing his stooped figure. No one followed, no news cameras, just silence, and a profound lesson etched deep. The next day, the Walmart resumed its routine, but something had shifted. Kayla taped a small handwritten sign behind her register. "This counter is for those who served no questions asked." She shared Harold's story with every coworker, her voice trembling, but her eyes resolute. The teen who'd filmed went home, quietly researching Fallujah. A year later, he enlisted, carrying a printed image of the eagle emblem. Tom, the manager, lost his bluster. A small Marine Corps flag appeared in the store's corner, where Harold had stood. No one asked who placed it, but all knew. It was Tom's apology. In this small town, Harold Grayson's story spread not through news, but through porch whispers, tales shared between young and old. People began looking closer at old men in worn shirts and scuffed shoes, shuffling down streets. The 8-year-old girl who'd asked, "Why are they laughing at him?" became the first student to propose a Veterans Day event at her school. A stone bench appeared in the park near the Walmart, inscribed in memory of those who walk quietly, but carry a nation on their shoulders. No one knew who paid for it. Some said Carver, others guessed Frank, but it didn't matter anymore. Harold never returned to the Walmart. He lived in his small house at the town's edge with his old dog, Sarge, brewing black coffee each morning and gazing through the window at the quiet street. One afternoon, he drove his battered pickup to the local cemetery where his comrades rested. He stood before a headstone, his hand on the name of the soldier from the photo, the one he'd vowed never to let fade. He said nothing, just stood there. The wind rustled his silver hair. A few steps away, a child with his father pointed at him, whispering, "Dad, who's that man?" The father didn't rush to answer. He watched Harold, then said softly, "Someone you should thank your whole life. Son, even if he never asks for it." Harold Grayson's story didn't end in spotlights or with a medal. It ended in small acts, quiet changes, and lessons that needed no words. Some heroes no longer wear uniforms, yet they walk among us, still carrying the weight of a generation's sacrifice. And they deserve to be seen. Harold, with his eagle and barbed wire tattoo, proved that sacrifice doesn't need applause. It speaks for itself. As you leave this story, remember that sometimes a hero wears no rank, no medals, no headlines. They might stand right before you. They don't demand gratitude, but the one thing they deserve is to be heard, to be respected, and never forgotten. If this story made you pause, share it. Somewhere out there, another Harold may be quietly living, waiting to be recognized. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more profound stories. And if you've met a silent hero in your life, tell us in the comments below. Let's keep the flame of gratitude burning. Don't let it fade.